Hello, cinephiles, and welcome to Scene Breakdown. In this series, I take a deep dive into scenes from across film history, and because Halloween Kills is slashing its way into theaters, I thought it would only be appropriate to look back at a scene from the John Carpenter film that started it all, 1978's Halloween.
I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
When I look for a scene to deconstruct, I try to find the most iconic scene in that film. And in the case of Halloween, that scene is absolutely the climax of the film. The final confrontation between Michael Myers and final girl Laurie Strode. However, when I re-watched Halloween for this video, I ran into a problem. When exactly does the climax begin? When deconstructing a famous scene, typically the start and end of the scene are easy to identify. For example, I am working on a deep dive into the opening sequence of 2006's Casino Royale. In this case, the start and end of the sequence are simple to identify. The sequence begins when the film begins, and the sequence ends when Bond turns around and shoots the audience in the face. In the case of Halloween, those boundaries are not so easily defined. Yes, Halloween does have scenes with clear beginnings and endings. The opening scene of Michael stalking and eventually killing his sister, or the scene that follows where Dr. Loomis and a nurse discover that the patients of Smith's Grove Sanitarium have escaped are both good examples. However, as we get further into the film, the lines between when a scene begins and when a scene ends start to break down. It's probably easier if I just show you what I mean. The following scene takes place 31 minutes into the film. For context, Laurie Strode, our lead character, has been picked up by Annie, Laurie's friend and also the sheriff's daughter, and the two are driving together to their respective babysitting jobs. Previous to the scene that we are about to examine, Dr. Loomis and a cemetery worker discover that the gravestone of Judith Myers, Michael Myers' sister and first victim, has been stolen. Cut to Annie and Laurie driving to their babysitter jobs. They pass between them what I am going to call a cigarette. Annie asks Laurie if she is still spooked. Laurie proclaims that she was never spooked, and Annie replies, "Lies." Laurie tells Annie how she saw someone standing in Mr. Riddle's backyard, and Annie is in disbelief. Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult plays on the radio. Cut to the car that we recognize as the station wagon that Michael Myers stole the night before turns left onto the same street as Annie's car and begins to follow them. Annie reminds Laurie that Mr. Riddle is 87, to which Laurie responds he can still watch. From this point on, we will always be able to see Michael's car in the background. Cut to an isolated medium close-up of Annie taking a drag of the cigarette. She asks what the pumpkin is for. Cut to an isolated medium close-up of Laurie that mirrors the previous shot. Laurie explains that the pumpkin is for Tommy, the boy that Laurie will be babysitting that night, so he can make a jack-o'-lantern with it. Cut to the same two-shot that started the sequence. Annie tells Laurie she always thought she would make an excellent Girl Scout. Laurie sarcastically thanks her, and Annie goes on to say that she might as well be a Girl Scout tonight. Cut to the same isolated medium close-up from shot number 3. Annie reveals her plan to make popcorn and watch Dr. Dementia, 6 straight hours of horror movies. Cut to the same isolated medium close-up of Laurie from shot 4, with Laurie looking over to Annie as Laurie tries to take another drag of the cigarette. Annie doesn't think little Lindsay Wallace will know what hit her when she sees those horror films. Laurie starts to cough. Cut to Annie's isolated MCU as she accepts the returning cigarette. Laurie continues to cough. Cut to Laurie's isolated MCU as she continues to cough, sniffling before we cut to Annie taking a drag from the cigarette, pausing, and then reacting as she sees her father down the road. Cut to Laurie's isolated MCU as Annie instructs her to get rid of the cigarette. Laurie moves the cigarette out of our view. Cut to an exterior shot of Annie's car driving into the distance, the camera panning to match the movement of the car before settling. The Myers car enters the frame from the left and pulls over. The music has been replaced by an alarm going off. Cut to a shot from the passenger's perspective in Annie's car, although not strictly a POV shot from Laurie's perspective. The car turns left and parks on the side of the street between 2 police cars. The camera pans right as the car turns in order to center Annie's father, the sheriff, in frame. Laurie continues to cough as Annie pleads with her to stop coughing and to just be natural. As the car comes to a stop, the window descends and the sheriff approaches the car. The sheriff says hello to Annie, then to Laurie. Cut to a 2-shot of Laurie and Annie from outside the passenger door. Annie says hi and asks her father what happened. The alarm is so loud that the sheriff can't hear Annie, so Annie leans in and repeats herself. This begins a shot-reverse shot sequence where the framing does not change. Cut to the sheriff telling them that someone broke into the hardware store and it was probably kids. Cut to Annie proclaiming that her father blames everything on kids. Cut to the sheriff tells them that only some Halloween masks, some rope, and a couple of knives were taken. Cut to Annie giving Laurie a look as the sheriff rhetorically asks, "Who do you think it was?" Annie tells Laurie that it's hard growing up with a cynical father. A pause, then the sheriff asks them if they are going to be late. Annie leans forward, not able to hear her father over the alarm. Cut to the sheriff yelling and repeating his question as the alarm is finally turned off. Cut to Annie speaking directly to Laurie, saying that the sheriff shouts too. Cut to the sheriff, understanding that his daughter has gotten the better of him, waving and saying goodbye. Cut to Annie and Laurie both saying their goodbyes as Annie drives the car forward to frame right. This will be the last time the sheriff sees his daughter alive. Cut to an over-the-shoulder shot from behind the sheriff as Annie pulls away. In the distance, we see Dr. Loomis appear and walk towards the sheriff. Loomis asks if this man is the sheriff, then continues to walk forward to introduce himself. The camera pans to the left to keep both men in frame, eventually settling when Loomis begins to introduce himself. The sheriff introduces himself, and Dr. Loomis asks for a moment of the sheriff's time. The sheriff says maybe in a few minutes, and Loomis insists that it is important. We see Michael Myers' stolen car appear above and to the left of the sheriff's shoulder, waiting for traffic to pass at the intersection. The sheriff tells Loomis that he needs 10 minutes and walks out of frame left. Loomis responds he will be here, turning his back to the intersection. Michael Myers' car waits for traffic, then makes the left-hand turn and exits frame right. Myers now continuing his pursuit of Laurie. End scene. This scene that lasts for 2 minutes and 22 seconds is made up of 3 distinct sections. Annie and Laurie driving, Annie speaking with the sheriff, and Loomis approaching the sheriff. Even though all 3 of these sections feature a changing roster of characters and serve different functions related to the plot, they are all temporally and geographically interconnected. The section where Annie speaks with her father begins when she first sees him as she's driving and struggles to hide her cigarette by passing it to Laurie. And Dr. Loomis meeting the sheriff begins in the same shot as Annie driving away. The end of each section is also the beginning of the next, which is why I consider this entire sequence to be one complete scene and not 3 separate scenes. Now, I admit that this is not one of the most iconic scenes in Halloween, but it is illustrative of a theme that permeates the film: the breaking of boundaries. Michael's main 2 actions in the film, breaking the boundary between public and private space as he enters people's homes, and breaking the boundary of the flesh when he stabs people, are further examples of this. Interconnecting sections which would normally be individual scenes into one larger scene is an example of that theme being applied to the construction of the film itself. Now that we know how boundaries between scenes are being broken, we can see why it is so difficult to figure out when the climax of the film begins. The sequence certainly ends as the credits roll, but what is the first shot? Is it when Laurie stands up, followed by Myers standing as well? When Laurie realizes that Michael Myers is behind her and a threat to the children? When Tommy opens the door for Laurie as Myers stalks her? When Laurie discovers Annie's dead body? When Laurie decides to head across the street to investigate after the strange call from Linda? When Myers dresses up like a ghost? Or maybe when Myers kills Linda's boyfriend? All of these moments are geographically and temporally linked to each other, just like those in the scenes that I examined. If we were all to agree that the final climax begins with Linda's boyfriend's death, that's 24 minutes of screen time before the credits roll. And honestly, I think we can go back even further than that if we want to, even as far back as Annie's murder. Ultimately, it's this relentless and unending climax that makes the final section of the film so terrifying and so iconic. Like the characters in Halloween's final scene, the terror for the audience never ends. There are no cutaways to comic relief or B-plot that allows us to catch our breath. As soon as Michael's final rampage begins, we witness it unfold in near real time, changing perspectives from time to time, but there are always bridges taking us from one point of horror to the next. There is, simply put, no escape for the characters or the audience other than the final roll of the credits. That is, until you start watching Halloween 2, which begins by showing you a modified version of the final sequence of 1978's Halloween. Considering that scenes in Halloween bleed into one another, it seems only fitting that one film would bleed into the other as well. Cinephiles, thank you so much for watching this scene breakdown. Did you gain a new perspective on Halloween from watching this video? If so, please give this video a like. And if you disagree with me or have something to add, please begin a discussion in the comments below. While you're down there, please subscribe to Cinematech. I appreciate you, and I will see you soon.